Greetings and salutations. Lydia here, back to share another video with you today. This video will be the second in my Lydia's Library series, and in this video I'll be sharing with you excerpts from and my reflections on That's What the Old Ones Say. So this book is by Chief Joseph Riverwind, assisted by his lovely wife, Dr. Lara Lynn Riverwind. I had a wonderful opportunity last fall to attend the Nephilim Mounds 3 conference in Ohio, and Chief Joseph spoke at the conference, and Dr. Lara Lynn Riverwind also spoke and played music, and they're both very talented musicians, lovely people, and strong warriors for Christ. As far as, you know, when I met them, that was the impression I had. And Chief Joseph is a wonderful storyteller. So this book I wanted to share because, well, for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's probably not that well known. If you are not that familiar with L.A. Marzulli, and he's kind of how I got into hearing about and learning about Chief Joseph. So if you've not really gone down that area, then you may not have even heard of this book. And the really cool thing is that in addition to having extraordinary stories that I have never heard before, and these are, first-hand accounts from these First Nations people, the elders of their tribes. In addition to that, it also gives you a different lens to look at the Creator, Jehovah, Yahweh, and His Son Yeshua, just in a whole different way, or Yeshua if you prefer. And I have to say, during the conference, growing up, having gone to church, it was Jesus and God, Holy Spirit. Of course, these are all wonderful. Lord, Lord of hosts. But during the conference, I noticed that most of the presenters and a good number of attendees preferred to use Jehovah. They preferred to use Yahweh. When referring to Jesus, they preferred to use Yeshua. And there was just something really beautiful about those names. And I don't know, it just really, the beauty and love of God, it just emanated from so many people there. And I think that using those true names of God, that there's just something powerful about that. And also in my own personal prayer life, as I've developed in my walk with God, I often begin my prayer by just repeating back to God who He is, because I don't think there's anything more wonderful than that. That Father God, the Creator, the Lord of hosts, you are love, you created the heavens and the earth, Alpha and Omega, and I just think that's really powerful. And maybe, and I also now find myself using, Jehovah and Yahweh, Yeshua, usually in combination with the ones that I was more familiar with, but that's just really something cool. And if you take that and then you also amplify this new perspective by integrating it with these Native American stories and histories, it really gives you a special appreciation, I think, for God's plan and how He works. And anyway, I think, I don't know, maybe it's not for everybody, but this was definitely for me. So I hope that others maybe will get something out of this as well. So what I'll do, similar to my last book review, is I'll go through a couple sections that really spoke to me and read those verbatim, and then give some reflection, right? I want to say up front that my primary language obviously is English, even though I stumble every now and then. I speak a little bit of Spanish, very little, and some German, but certainly no, I don't speak any native First Nations languages. So as such, I will try to pronounce these as best I can. However, I will probably stumble over some of them, so just want to apologize up front. I really don't mean any disrespect. Really just want to share this with whoever was willing to watch this video, and I really will try to do my best. Alright, so disclaimer out of the way, I will jump in here at page 11, which is in the introduction section, and just to give you a little context, this book kind of goes, this is actually in chapter 1. This book goes in and out of interactions that Chief Joseph is having with Pipe Carrier. They're go out into the woods together and sit around a fire, and Chief Joseph is sharing stories that he's heard from other elders of different tribes, and he is sharing these with Pipe Carrier, who is from the Lakota tribe and was a great warrior and from a line of holy men and warriors, and was a descendant of Ghost Dance Boy, a survivor of the massacre at Wounded Knee. So he'll kind of reflect sometimes on that, and then he'll go into the stories themselves and also reflect on his past and his walk with God. So I hope none of that gets too confusing. It really is seamless as the story develops and going back and forth, and it's notated very well with some dashes in between the sections so that you have a little context there. But since you're not reading it and you're listening to it, I just want to put that out there in case it gets confusing at all. So having said all that, we will finally get to the first section, which is page 11 of chapter 1. I sat in the not-so-terribly comfortable front row petrified wooden pew next to my stepmother as she prayed. As my mind wandered, I looked back at everyone in the church, praying, shouting, and making a big ruckus praising the Lord. Hermana Pura was a Tano Indian woman, born and raised in the mountains of our homeland, and she was the pastor of this little mountain church. Culturally, the women of our tribe share equally with the men, often serving as kakaki, which is chief, as well as with the men in war. The little white church in the mountains she pastored was highly favored with the presence of God. The music was really loud, and when I say really loud, I mean loud like only Caribbean people can make loud. My wife, Larilyn, says that my people only have one volume when we speak, and that is Tano volume. It is yet to be proven, but it is strongly hypothesized that my Tano people are incapable of what some cultures call a whisper. While microphones are rarely needed to augment a well-formed Tano mouth, they are always greatly appreciated at an event, making it much more fun. Try to imagine an eardrum-piercing, cranked-up soundboard shrieking loud praise and worship music, and then turn that up even more. The phrase ear-splitting comes to mind. We were sitting on the front pew, turned around, looking at the scene behind us. When I spun back around toward the pulpit, all of a sudden I saw white smoke start to billow from the pulpit. It began to roll down the steps leading up to the altar. It was pure white and silky, if smoke can be described as such. There was no scent, but I felt a powerful presence in the room as I saw the smoke rolling closer toward me. Even though I didn't smell the smoke, I knew fire only meant one thing, and it was serious. Everyone else was being so distracted with eyes closed or dancing about, I realized they hadn't noticed the smoke at all. So at the top of my lungs I yelled, "The church is on fire!" "Hallelujah! Praise the Lord!" People in the congregation shouted as I kept yelling over and over again, "The church is on fire!" It seemed to me that the more I yelled, the more fervent people became in their praise and worship, and the more I became frustrated. I grabbed my little brother by the arm and yelled over the shouting and praising, "Come on, we have to get out of here!" We ran down the middle of the church and out the double doors into the front parking area. We ran as far as the edge of the road and turned around to look back, expecting to see people running out with flames jumping off their back, accompanied by screams of agony. Instead, I stood there in utter shock at what I saw. On each corner of the church exterior were immense columns of pure white light, nearly engulfing the entire building with their radiance. Within each column, through the intensity of the light, I could just barely make out a figure standing there, holding a sword of fire with both hands clasped around the hilt at chest level, with the tip pointing down. I knew at once that these were angels. Not the typical winged, chubby baby angels you see drawn by most artists. No, these were warrior angels. They were powerfully intense to look at, an experience that I will never forget. A glance back told me that the smoke was now pouring out through the middle doors of the church that remained open after our mad dash to safety. As I stood there in awe, trying to catch my breath, everyone who was hanging out outside was looking at us standing there gawking at the church. "Do you see them?" I asked the younger crowd of people who were outside. "Don't you see them? How can you not see them?" I yelled to anyone who would listen. "Do you see them?" I asked my little brother. He nodded his head yes, without taking his eyes off the angelic warrior standing guard at the church. Okay, so that is the end of the quoted section here. I just thought that was a really neat story. I've never seen an angel myself, but I can't even imagine what that experience must be like. So I thought that I would share that. Okay, so I'm going to hop ahead just a bit here to page 17, which is the beginning of chapter 2. And I think I'll just read it and then do a little reflection of it. In el tiempo de las Guacara, in the time of the cave's ancient times, our Tano people were given prophecies of things to come that would change our world forever, my father said as he gazed longingly into the night sky. The old ones foretold that 3 strange war canoes would come to our shores, and that these war canoes would be filled with pale-faced, bearded men who were Hikotia Wamikani, which translates to covered like turtles. These Hikotia Wamikani would carry with them talking leaves which would bring further knowledge about the Creator. With the advent of these talking leaves, there would come a great destruction of our people and way of life. November 19th, 1493, was a day that would forever change my Tano people's world. Never again would life be the same as it had been for centuries or millennia. As one, my people had arrived at a crossroads. Just as the old prophecies foretold, the 3 strange war canoes called La Nina, La Pinta, and La Santa Maria were sighted off the coast of the shore of Quisquia. These strange canoes brought a message of eternal life with their cold steel swords standing by as if waiting for orders. The Bible came off those ships, which we would soon recognize to be the talking leaves foretold. Unfortunately, its advent came with a terrible price. So that was the next section I wanted to read. Put a slide up here, Columbusted, because if this is not something you're familiar with, it may come as a shock to you, but I think maybe it's been more socialized now than it was before. So when I was growing up, everybody learned 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. That he was an adventurous sailor, and that he convinced Queen Isabella to fund his journey, and finally she would, and he came across the ocean, discovered America, and we have Columbus Day. Yay, right? Any reason to be off school was a good thing. But in the last year or two, I had seen a video about Columbus and some of the atrocities that he had done, and Chief Joseph recounts some of this information in his book as well, and also there is a bibliography at the end in case you want to check the sources that he uses. But he shares stories about the Indians, that the Spanish cut off the Indians' hands and left them dangling around their necks if they didn't collect enough gold. Stories about children being run down by dogs. It's really awful. It's really terrible. It's barbaric, and I don't think I said this, and I should have probably began this, but Chief Joseph's tribe, the Tano people, are the tribe of first contact. So he actually comes from the tribe that suffered the most at the hands of the Spanish. And so this is where some of his struggles came in, seeing the beautiful message of love from the Creator through his people's stories and words and culture, and then when the Spanish came and they supposedly have these talking leaves that are going to give them more information about the Creator, but at the same time, they are butchering the people and doing just horrible things. So I cannot even imagine, what that must be like. So anyway, that was that section. I did want to kind of just take a look here at an article. There's lots of different places you can go to get information on this. I just pulled up an article from the Telegraph in the UK, and they go into, some of the atrocities of Columbus, the massacres. He, when he returned the second time, he made sure to bring plenty of soldiers and dogs that were trained to kill people. It just, there's some images here that are graphic. The author says it was an orgy of looting and butchery, faithfully recorded by eyewitnesses. The accounts are too graphic to quote, but they detail the widespread massacres, including of children, dashing out their brains and even feeding them to the armored attack dogs. This senseless savagery was described as pacification. So there you go. It's really awful. And I myself have decided that I will never celebrate another Columbus Day. And as far as I'm concerned, I think that we should be petitioning against it. I think that there are a lot of other people that we could celebrate, and the Columbus is not one of them. And it does strike me as very curious how these heroes, putting air quotations around that, get chosen for us. Who decides that these are the people that we will lift up? Who decides that Einstein is the person that we need to look up to as the most intelligent person? Like, oh, you're no Einstein, when, there are so many more people like Nikola Tesla who are, I would say arguably, but it's hardly even arguable that he wasn't more intelligent than Einstein, but arguably more intelligent than Einstein, and certainly contributed more to our society than Einstein ever did. So it just strikes me as very curious, and you just have to wonder. I think that's why it's so easy for people to get into this. There's an elite that decide these things, and if you're part of that club, you're a good guy, and, they write the history books, and they get their way. It's really easy to see that when you see people who are so wretched and terrible and just commit these awful atrocities, and they're lifted up. I don't live in Ohio, but I live close to Ohio, and the capital city is Columbus. It's Columbus, Ohio. It's just awful. It's just awful. So I think maybe this has inspired you to boycott Columbus Day. I think, maybe next Columbus Day I'll have to make a t-shirt that says "Down with Columbus Day" or something. We should be writing in to end this, because it's really terrible. Alright, so getting back to the book. The next section I'd like to read is starting, it starts on page 44. This is chapter 3, and this is one of the stories from a tribe that Chief Joseph is sharing. I believe he's sharing this with Pipe Carrier. So this is the Choctaw story of the Great Flood. In the far distant ages of the past, the people whom the Great Spirit had created became so wicked that he resolved to sweep them all from the earth, except Oklatabashi, one who mourns for the people, and his family, who alone did that which was good. He told Oklatabashi to build a large boat into which he would go with his family, and also to take into the boat a male and female of all animals living upon the earth. He did this as he was commanded by the Great Spirit. But as he went out into the forest to bring in the birds, he was unable to catch a pair of biskinik, sapsuckers, thitakok, yellowhammers, and bok-bok, large red-headed woodpeckers. These birds were so quick in hopping around from one side to the other of the trees upon which they clung with their sharp and strong claws that Oklatabashi found it was impossible for him to catch them, and therefore he gave up the chase and returned to the boat. The door closed, the rain began to fall, increasing in volume for many days and nights until thousands of people and animals perished. Then it suddenly ceased, and utter darkness covered the face of the earth for a long time, while the people and animals that still survived grouped here and there in the fearful gloom. Suddenly, far in the distant north, there was seen a long streak of light. They believed that, amid the raging elements and the impenetrable darkness that covered the earth, the sun had lost its way and was rising in the north. All the surviving people rushed toward the seemingly rising sun, though utterly bewildered, not knowing or caring what they did. They saw in utter despair that it was but the mocking light that foretold how near the Akaphalama was at hand, rolling like mountains on mountains, piled upon each other and engulfing everything in its resistless course. All earth was at once overwhelmed in the mighty return of waters, except the great boat, which by the guidance of the Great Spirit rode safely upon the rolling and crashing waves that cover the earth. For many moons the boat floated safely o'er the vast sea of waters. Finally, Akalatabasha sent a dove to see if any dry land could be found. She soon returned with her beak full of grass, which she had gathered from a desert island. Akalatabasha, to reward her for her discovery, mingled a little salt in her food. Soon after this the water subsided and the dry land appeared. Then the occupants of the great boat went forth to repeople another earth. But the dove, having acquired a taste for salt during her stay in the boat, continued its use by finding it at the salt licks that then abounded in many places, to which the cattle and deer also frequently resorted. Every day after eating she visited a salt lick to eat a little salt to aid her digestion, which in the course of time became habitual, and thus was transmitted to her offspring. In the course of years she became a grandmother, and took great delight in feeding and caring for her grandchildren. One day, however, after having eaten some grass seed, she unfortunately forgot to eat a little salt as usual. For this neglect the Great Spirit would not allow her and her descendants from eating salt. When she returned home that evening, her grandchildren, as usual, began to coo for their supply of salt, but their grandmother had been forbidden to give them any more, and they cooed in vain. From that day to this, in memory of this lost privilege, the doves everywhere, on the return of spring, still continue their cooing for salt, which they will never again be permitted to eat. Such is the ancient tradition of the Choctaws of the origin of the cooing doves. So I won't read the rest of the story, but that to me is very interesting. There's also a story about a sky tower, and many other stories that can be found in the biblical narrative as well. And that's kind of the whole, I wouldn't say it's the whole point of this book. I think there's a lot of different things that one can take from this book. But one of the major themes is that the stories of First Nations people mirror the biblical stories, and that they are worshiping the same creator, and that the Bible was, more information for them concerning the creator, but that they, already love the creator, and that they have these stories in common. So I thought that was pretty interesting. The next section that I wanted to read from, it's on page 55. This is chapter 4, I believe. Yeah, chapter 4. And I just want to get back to, the center of this book as, Chief Joseph's journey to Christ, and understanding of his purpose and his path. So from page 55, but even better than trading in weapons of worldly war for those of a spiritual war was a realization that the Creator's only Son had given his life in trade for mine. What a somber thought! I knew I should honor his memory in a good way. My native dance to the sun, to honor his sacrifice, would be my life's dance. Every step should be taken in praise. Every time I raise my dance stick will be to honor him. I just thought that was really beautiful. And I'm reminded that I believe it was King David was known to dance for the Lord. So I think that that's really cool too. I think In this book, Chief Joseph reflects, soberly about the fact that the Christians may be well-meaning, when they convert First Nations people or were presenting the gospel to First Nations people, that they wanted to change their way of life, but you don't need to. There's nothing wrong with celebrating God by beating on the drum. There's nothing wrong with singing to the Lord. There's nothing wrong with dancing for the Lord. And Chief Joseph does a great job of, quoting verses from the Bible and then talking about the traditions of the people and how they, live that truth and that praise. So I think that was really neat too. I'm trying not to make this as long, so I'm not reading as much from the book. I really encourage you to get it I'm really not doing it complete justice, I don't think. It would be much better just to read the whole thing to you, but as you can tell already, I was stumbling over some of the words. So I probably would just ruin it. So that's why I'm trying to paraphrase a little bit more than I did in the last section. I do, some of the most compelling pieces, though, are of the Native American stories or First Nations people stories, and how that plays into and supports the narrative of the Bible. So the next section I'll read is on page 63, The Sundance. In the long ago time, there was an old chief of the Lakota people. This was in the time when the Lakota were still on the East Coast. The Lakota weren't always buffalo hunters of the plains as most people today have read about in their history books. They were originally located in the East, and there is still a remnant of them who can be found there today, called the Waccamaw Sioux by some. This story takes place before the Lakota were pushed to the west where they are today. A great and terrible sickness fell upon the land. All of the people were getting sick and dying, and no one knew what to do. The medicine men and women tried everything to their deepest knowledge with teas, salves, and ointments made from plants, but nothing was working, and the people continued to die. As is custom among the people, the old man chief prepared for his journey to go up to the sacred mountain in order to fast and pray for an answer. The first day the chief was on the mountain, he stood with his weathered arms stretched out towards the heavens, and he cried out in a loud yet humble voice, "Creator, maker of all things and giver of breath, I come humbly before you on this vision quest. Your people need help. They are dying, and I do not know what to do. We've tried everything that we know, and nothing has worked to keep the people from dying. Is there a plant medicine that you can show me how to make a tea or salve that I can bring to the people to heal them?" There was no answer. The second day the chief stood once again after a full day of singing, dancing, and praying. He looked out upon the land and raised his eyes to the sky and cried out once again, "Wakan Tanka, O Great One, you alone know all things, and you are the one who spread the stars out across the sky. Your people are dying, and I do not know what to do. Our medicine people have tried every herb, and our holy men have tried every prayer. Nothing is working, and the people are dying. Is there a song that you can give me that I can sing over my people so that they may live?" There was no answer. The third day the chief stood again, although the hunger had begun to gnaw at his empty stomach, and the thirst was like fire that cannot be quenched. This was to be expected. It did not stop him from his duty to his people. As he stood, he looked desperately to the sky for an answer. With hands raised high, he called once again upon the Creator. "Tunkasila, Grandfather, you who are without beginning or end, you who formed man from the earth in the palm of your hands, your children need your help. They are dying, and nothing we have done has worked. Please, Creator, is there a dance that you can show me that I can pray and war in the spirit realm with?" There was no answer. The light of the sun was on its journey to the west as the chief looked on in awe at the beauty of what Creator had made. With only a small amount of time left before the end of the fourth day, the chief held out hope the Creator would answer his prayer. He slowly stood with his arms raised high and his head facing the heavens. He was over the hunger pangs and was no longer thirsty, as his spirit was being fed now through the songs and prayers of the people. "Great mystery! You who made the moon and the stars and placed them in the sky. You gave us life and have sustained us throughout the generations. Please, Creator, your children are dying, and I don't know what to do other than pray and seek an answer from you. How can my people be saved, O Great One in the sky?" Just then, Creator sent a spirit being who hovered in the sky above the old chief, who dropped to his knees in awe at this powerful spirit being that appeared before him. The spirit being moved its arms and with its fingers drew a window in the sky above the old chief, then looked at where he was standing. "Look through this window, and you will see the answer to your prayers," the spirit said with authority. The old chief looked through the large opening in the sky that the spirit had formed. He saw a man who was pierced and hanging on a tree. The spirit spoke again. "He is dying so that your people may live." The spirit then turned toward the opening in the sky, and it began to shrink as the last rays of the sun were being pulled into the western horizon. "Wait!" the old chief exclaimed. "What is his name, so that we can remember him and his sacrifice for our people? There is no greater honor among our people than to give your life for another." The spirit turned to look at the old chief. With an ageless voice, the spirit said, "His name is Bright Morning Star. Remember his name." And with those words the spirit looked to the sky world and was gone as fast as a bolt of lightning. The old chief fell to his knees weeping and thanked the Creator, for he knew that his people would be healed. That's what the old ones say. So that's the end of that section, and wow, there's so much in there. What really strikes me is how the words, the descriptions of the Creator as, without beginning and end, that these are all very much, if you're a Christian, you've read your Bible, then these are all things that you would have heard, right? That you would have read, depending on your translation, but that you should have read, should have come upon. So yeah, I think that is really amazing, and I really love it too, because it always is something that kind of struck me, if when Christ died on the cross, if the Native Americans or the First Nations people were already in the American continents, then how did they get the message of Christ? How could they be saved by Christ before they were introduced to the Bible as we know it? And I just think that's really cool, that there are stories that information was shared with them, that God sent a messenger to them. And his name isn't Angel Moroni, or sorry, Alright, I won't get into the Mormon thing. That is something that was very interesting though. Okay, so I think I'm just going to go ahead and end with some of the information about prophecy, because I thought that was pretty neat. So there's lots more in here about other stories that are very similar to the Bible stories that we know. There's some great information about Kokopelli, which if you've ever seen that symbol, I'll pull it up on the screen here. So this is Kokopelli, which I have seen before on different art, usually a Western style art, and he's got his little flute and he's playing on his little flute there. Happy little guy. You see people with earrings and some blankets and t-shirts and things. It's actually a very dark story. Chief Joseph goes into it a bit. Chapter 8, as fathers hide your daughters, that Kokopelli is coming. And this is actually a demon. It seems to be that he would come and say that if you don't give your daughters to me to do terrible things that would often end in the girls losing their life, that I will stop the rain from coming and everyone will die of hunger. So think about that. Next time you see a nice pair of silver earrings with little turquoise on them with this figure, maybe don't do that. Maybe don't wear that symbol unless you've done your research and that's something you want to support. the symbology that is accepted and that is out there, and I'm not just talking about the pyramids on, the currency. Things that people just accept without question, that, oh, well, this is just, a legend, and I don't know that I've even thought about what the story behind that is. I probably just thought it was a flute player. I did not realize that it was a deity, and certainly not that it was a, how would you say, malevolent deity at that. So just a little tidbit. I'm not going to go into the whole, all the background that he gives here, but that is something to think about. So there we are. So as I said, I'm going to end my review a little bit short of some of the sections that I wanted to share, but it's already 35 minutes long, which is probably long enough that most people are going to tune out by now. And this is beginning on page 131, chapter 8, Fathers, Hide Your Daughters. The fire was slowly fading, so we occasionally dropped a few dry pine cones and small twigs into it in order to keep it lit for the soft light it emitted. My mind was racing, full of all the things Pipe Carrier and I had been talking about this evening. I knew that I wouldn't remember all of our vast conversation which had spanned many moons of our lives. I gazed into the fire and felt, sensed deep in my inner being that things were not getting better with mankind and that we were delving closer to the edge of destruction. Elders from First Nations tribes had received prophetic visions of things to come thousands of years ago. The Hopi said that when the spider's web covered the earth, it was close to the time when the fires would come. According to the Mohawk prophecy of the 7th generation, 7 generations after contact with the palefaces, the Onkwahonwa, real people, would see the day when the trees would die from the tops down. The prophecy said that strange animals would be born, deformed or without limbs. Huge stone monsters would tear open the face of the earth. The rivers would burn as if water could catch on fire. The air will become harmful and burn the eyes of man. According to the prophecy of the 7th generation, the Onkwahonwa, real people, would see a time when the birds will fall from the sky and fish will be found dead in the waters. Mankind will come to express remorse for the way that he has treated what Creator entrusted us to care of. The last part of the prophecy is that after 7 generations of living in close contact with the palefaces, the Onkwahonwa would rise up and demand that their rights and stewardship over the earth be respected and restored. Support will come from men and women that will come to the Onkwahonwa to the eastern door of the Iroquois Confederacy for guidance and learning. Great turmoil will engulf the earth after these things come to pass, and there will be great battles where many will perish. We are now seeing the trees are beginning to die from the top down in the west, acid rain. The stone monster tearing up the land could be construction equipment. Air pollution is becoming a serious health risk and is tied into the acid rain as well. Polluted rivers have burned from oil or other toxic waste that have been dumped into it, and deformities in animals and human beings is become widespread. Could these be the interpretation of these ancient prophecies? We are to look for these signs so we know that the times of the fires are coming soon. When we see these things, we must begin to prepare and teach our children how to survive in the face of great adversity. It is this present generation of youth of the Kanien'kehá:ka Mohawk to provide the example and leadership needed to help people during these difficult times. Love between people will grow dim like a dying fire, and there will be times of hardship and testing. The children of the Kanien'kehá:ka Mohawk are the 7th generation spoken of in these old prophecies. The Cheyenne said that when the buffalo cover the land once again, the time is near for the fires that will cleanse the earth. Not only have buffalo numbers increased across this land, but their images have covered the nation when the buffalo nickel was recently reintroduced, newly minted, by the U.S. Treasury in 2005. The virtual spider has spun its worldwide web across the planet. Even the physical web of electrical and telephone wires has spun its way around our world, suspended on dead trees we call telephone poles. These 3 prophecies have come to pass in our lifetime, with several more that have yet to happen. Alright, so that was the last section I was going to read for this video anyway, I think that is terribly interesting. I mean, certainly in the Bible, God had promised not to destroy the whole world with a flood again, and that the world would be cleansed by fire. That is mirrored in these Native American prophecies. And I have to say, the first time I read that the great spider would spread her web across the land, that would signal the end, that we were getting closer to the end of, to the time of the great fires, rather. I got goosebumps. Because, like you said, you've got the World Wide Web. I mean, that's even what we call it. And, of course, the telephone poles, the telephone wires as well. So, anyway, just to recap, I really feel like I did not do this justice, but I hope I at least piqued your interest, and that you may check it out for yourself. Again, it's very moving, different perspective, and something that I don't know that you could get anywhere else. So highly recommend That's What the Old Ones Say. Hope you enjoyed the review, and God bless. Have a wonderful day.